An ancient map holds more secrets than any treasure chest. We are about to decode the hidden language of cartography, the art and science of mapmaking, to uncover narratives of power, belief, and exploration etched onto parchment and paper. By the end of this journey, you will possess the skills to read any historical map like a detective solving a cold case. Why did mapmakers fill oceans with monsters that never existed? What forbidden knowledge was concealed inside seemingly innocent coastlines? This is not about geography, but about the stories we told ourselves about the world. What do you believe is the biggest lie a map has ever told? A compass rose does far more than point north. Etched onto a map, it often reveals which empire or kingdom the cartographer considered the center of the universe, its ornate arms reaching out to claim dominance over the known world. This is the essence of the cartographic cipher, the fundamental language you need to understand before any secret can be revealed. Think of an old map not as a simple picture, but as a complex text written in a visual dialect. Every single element, from the way the land is projected onto a flat surface to the specific style of the lettering used for city names, was a deliberate choice filled with meaning. This language is built from its core components, symbols, scales, colors, and artistic flourishes. These were the tools cartographers used to communicate much more than mere geography. They conveyed the cultural values of their time, the limits of their technology, and the political ambitions of their patrons. The historian J.B. Harley argued that maps are a way of conceiving, articulating, and structuring the entire human world. So when you look at a map, you are not just seeing land and sea. You are reading a coded message about power and belief. Consider the empty spaces, the vast regions left blank or labeled as terra incognita. This was rarely an admission of simple ignorance. Often, it was a powerful statement. An empty space could be a deliberate omission to hide a valuable trade route from rival nations. It could be a reflection of fear, representing lands considered too dangerous or spiritually forbidden to explore. Sometimes that blank area was an act of arrogance, dismissing entire cultures and their knowledge as unworthy of record. These silent voids on the parchment can be just as loud and telling as the most meticulously illustrated city. This is the basic lexicon, the starting vocabulary for any map detective. Once you understand that every line and symbol is part of a statement, you can begin to question what the mapmaker truly wanted you to see, and more importantly, what they hoped you would never notice. A phantom island is a cartographer's ghost, a place born from rumor and hope that stubbornly haunts the edges of the world. One of the most persistent of these spectral lands was High Brassel, a circular island said to lie shrouded in mist somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, west of Ireland. For 500 years, from the 1400s well into the 1800s, it appeared on reputable maps, its location shifting slightly with each new chart. Sailors told stories of an advanced civilization living there, a paradise that only became visible for one day every 7 years. Expeditions were launched to find it, drawn by a legend so powerful it became etched into the very documents meant to represent reality. These deceptions were rarely simple mistakes. Often, they were calculated decisions. A mapmaker might insert a fictional island, a town with a made-up name, or a non-existent mountain range as a copyright trap. If a rival publisher's map later featured the same fictitious detail, it was undeniable proof of plagiarism, but the motivations ran deeper than commercial rivalry. Cartographers worked for patrons, kings and queens who desired a world that reflected their power and their national myths. Including a legendary land like High Brassel could satisfy a sponsor's desire for a grander, more wondrous kingdom, or it could stake a premature claim to a territory not yet discovered, a cartographic land grab. An expert in historical geography notes that phantom islands reveal the limits of contemporary knowledge and the powerful role of hope and legend in exploration. This phenomenon was not confined to the Age of Sail. As recently as 2012, a place called Sandy Island was clearly marked on maps of the Pacific Ocean, northeast of Australia. It appeared on nautical charts and even Google Earth, yet when a research vessel sailed to its coordinates, they found only open water. The island was a complete fiction, a ghost that had persisted for over a century, likely copied from a whaler's era and then endlessly replicated. This practice shows us that maps were never purely scientific documents. They were tools that could be wielded for deception, filled with wishful thinking, national pride, and clever tricks. The presence of a phantom island forces us to ask a difficult question. If a map could so confidently lie about the existence of an entire landmass, what other, more subtle falsehoods might we be taking for granted? Those phantom islands were not the only deliberate fictions. Turn your eyes from the empty spaces to the crowded margins, and you will find a different kind of code written in scales and tentacles. The sea monsters and mythical beasts that swirl in the oceans of ancient charts are far more than decorative whimsy. They are a symbolic language representing the profound dangers and absolute mysteries of the unexplored world. Picture the Carta Marina from the 16th century, a map where the North Atlantic is a chaotic menagerie. Serpents large enough to crush ships coil in the depths, and whales are drawn with spines and spouts so dramatic they look like floating islands. This was not an attempt at accurate biology. It was a calculated effort to both terrify and fascinate the viewer, a visual story about what lay beyond the safe harbor. These creatures served a multitude of urgent purposes. They acted as clear, unforgettable markers for territories deemed perilous or simply unknown, a direct warning to any sailor daring to venture there. They were illustrations pulled directly from contemporary folklore and popular bestiaries, the medieval books of beasts, making the map a reflection of what people genuinely believed might be lurking in the deep. A maritime historian perfectly captures their function, noting that these sea monsters were the direct equivalent of the phrase "here be dragons." They were a universal cartographic shorthand for peril and the very limits of human knowledge. Consider the Xiphias, a creature often depicted on these maps. It was based on a real animal, the beaked whale, but the cartographer's pen transformed it into something monstrous, a hybrid beast with the face of an owl and the body of a fish, lunging from the waves to attack ships. This was not simple imagination. It was the encoding of a cultural fear, a way to represent the genuine awe and terror that the vast, unknown ocean inspired. Every time a mapmaker chose to draw such a creature, they were making a profound artistic statement. They were admitting that their science had limits, that beyond the known coastlines lay a realm of wonder and danger that could only be understood through myth and symbol. This practice of populating the unknown with beasts sets the stage for an even more subtle form of cartographic code, one hidden not in monsters, but in the very lines and shapes used to draw the land itself. Beyond the realm of myth and monster lies a world of deliberate, clandestine codes. Some of the most valuable maps ever drawn were not just guides, but locked chests of information, their true meaning encrypted to protect fortunes and national interests. Take a Portuguese portolan chart from the Age of Discovery, a beautifully detailed map of coastlines used for navigation. To the untrained eye, it appears to be a standard nautical aid. But for a select few, a specific cluster of rocks drawn just slightly off scale, or a unique symbol hidden among the waves, could point the way to an uncharted island overflowing with spices, the source of unimaginable wealth in that era. Cartographers and their royal sponsors employed a toolbox of cryptographic tricks to safeguard these economic and military secrets. They would intentionally distort a coastline by a few degrees, create a unique set of symbols known only to a single trading company, or even use invisible ink like lemon juice to mark a safe harbor that would only appear when the parchment was held near a candle's heat. An expert in cryptology perfectly captures this reality, stating that in an era of intense competition, a map was a classified document and its accuracy was a state secret. Consider the enduring controversy of the Vineland map, which some believe shows parts of North America before Columbus. Whether it is authentic or a brilliant forgery, the debate itself hinges on the idea of a hidden narrative, a coded claim to a discovery that could rewrite history. Privateers and pirates operating in a legal gray area relied on intricately coded charts that only their crews could interpret, marking hidden coves and treasure burial sites with symbols that looked like innocent landscape features. To spot these anomalies yourself, you must become a master of inconsistency. Look for a compass rose that seems misaligned with the grid, or a landmark that is drawn with unusual prominence for no apparent reason. Question why a particular bay is labeled with a strangely ornate font when everywhere else uses plain text. These subtle cues were the security system of their day, protecting the key to immense power. This relentless pursuit of hidden meaning, of codes that lead to gold, forces us to confront an even more pervasive layer of deception, one not meant for a select few but for the entire world. The most dangerous lies a map can tell are not about monsters but about borders. While pirates hid codes for treasure, empires used the entire canvas of a map to wage a silent war of persuasion. This is the world of cartographic propaganda, where the simple act of drawing a line becomes a declaration of power. A European colonial map from the 19th century is a masterclass in this subtle art. Vast territories in Africa or Asia, only loosely controlled by a distant European capital, are often colored in a uniform, bold hue, creating the visual impression of a single, unified, and total dominion. The complex tapestry of local kingdoms and independent peoples is simply erased, replaced by a clean, solid block of color labeled as a colony. This was not an error in geography. It was a deliberate political statement designed to legitimize conquest for an audience back home. A political geographer explains that maps do not just represent space, they actively construct it according to the ideologies of their creators. The choices were never neutral. Centering a world map on London or Paris implicitly placed that empire at the heart of the universe. Using a specific color to represent one's own nation, while painting rivals in muted or aggressive tones, was a way to visually claim moral and territorial superiority. Look at British maps of India from the same period. The hundreds of princely states that maintained a degree of autonomy are often depicted with faint, broken borders or a patchwork of subtle shades, making them appear insignificant and naturally subordinate to the solid, dominant pink of the British Raj. The map did not just show control, it performed it, convincing viewers that this hierarchy was simply the natural order of the world. This strategy extended far beyond the age of empire. During the Cold War, maps produced in Washington or Moscow became tools of psychological influence. A common tactic was the use of cartograms, maps where the size of a country is distorted not by its actual land area, but by another statistic, like military spending or nuclear arsenal. A map that dramatically inflated the size of a rival bloc, making it loom menacingly over its neighbors, was a powerful piece of propaganda designed to justify arms races and foster public fear. The truth of the map becomes entirely negotiable, molded by the ambitions of its patron. So the next time you look at any map, especially one that defines a border or a sphere of influence, you must ask a critical question. Who drew this line, and what were they trying to make me believe? Jerusalem sits at the heart of the world, not as a geographical fact but as a spiritual one. This was the guiding principle behind the medieval TO map, a stunning cartographic vision where faith completely overruled physical reality. Picture a perfect circle representing the entire known world, divided by a T shape into the three continents of Asia, Europe, and Africa. At the very center of this divine diagram, you always find Jerusalem. These maps were never intended to guide a traveler across the land. Their purpose was to guide a soul toward salvation, illustrating a Christian cosmology where every place derived its meaning from its relationship to the holy city. A scholar of religious iconography clarifies this intent, stating that for medieval cartographers, mapping the world was an act of devotion, a way to visualize God's creation. The sprawling Hereford Mappa Mundi is perhaps the ultimate expression of this. It is less a map and more an illuminated manuscript drawn on a single, massive sheet of parchment. Here, the city of Jerusalem is a detailed illustration at the very center, while the edges are crowded with biblical scenes from Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden to the final judgment. Mythical beasts roam the margins not as warnings to sailors, but as manifestations of a world filled with divine wonder and mystery. Standard features on such maps included the precise location of the Garden of Eden itself, often placed far in the east, and the 4 rivers of paradise flowing from it. These were not speculative fantasies to their creators, they were foundational truths. The map was a theological document, encoding a universe governed entirely by a divine order. Every line drawn was a statement of belief, a testament to a world where geography and faith were inseparably intertwined. This spiritual dimension reveals the most personal layer of all, the inner world of the mapmaker who saw their work not as a scientific survey, but as a sacred act of worship. Sometimes the most revealing secret is not in the land, but in the hand of the one who drew it. Hidden within the elaborate frames and ornate cartouches of Renaissance maps, the cartographer often left a personal signature, a quiet rebellion against the anonymity of their craft. These decorative panels, filled with swirling vines and classical figures, were far more than simple embellishment. They were the one place on the map where the artist could step out from behind the veil of objectivity and speak directly to us. In the intricate borders of Abraham Ortelius's famous atlas, Theatrum Orbis Terrarum, you can find hidden dates and subtle symbols woven into the design, a permanent record of the moment of creation. Gerardus Mercator, the man who gave his name to the most famous map projection in history, is believed to have embedded subtle self-references within his work, a cartographer's way of signing his masterpiece without a flashy nameplate. An art historian specializing in print culture notes that in an age before copyright, these personal touches were a way for the cartographer to claim authorship and express individuality. They were staking their claim on a world they had helped to define. These hidden messages could be deeply personal. A cartographer might include a tiny family crest to honor his lineage, or a self-portrait tucked into the corner of a continent, quietly placing himself on the stage of the world he had mapped. Sometimes these inserts carried a sharper edge. A cartouche might contain a cryptic dedication to a powerful patron, a necessary gesture of flattery, but it could also conceal a private joke or a veiled grievance, a silent protest against the very powers that funded the work. To find these imprints, you must learn to read the art, not just the geography. Look for a face in the clouds that seems too detailed, or a strange animal in the decorative border that does not fit the local fauna. Examine the Latin text within the scrolls for a play on words or a second meaning. These are the fingerprints of a human mind, a biographical layer that transforms a document of state into a personal diary. This intimate connection between creator and creation points toward the heavens, where cartographers encoded not just their identity, but the very clockwork of the cosmos. The stars themselves were drawn into the parchment, their silent light guiding the hand of the cartographer. Long before we had satellites, the most accurate maps were often those aligned with the heavens, where coastlines echoed constellations and borders followed celestial paths. This was not magic, but a sophisticated science that blended direct observation with a deep belief in cosmic influence. For the navigator on the open ocean, the North Star was a fixed point of salvation, but for the mapmaker in his studio, the entire night sky was a grid to be replicated. A Portolan chart might appear to be a simple drawing of shores and harbors, but its very layout could be a terrestrial mirror of a specific stellar arrangement, a secret key for those who knew how to read it. An expert in the history of science confirms this profound connection, stating that for early navigators, the stars were as crucial as the compass, and this symbiosis is etched into their maps. The famous Piri Reis map, a fragment of a larger world chart from the 16th century, contains mysterious annotations that some scholars believe align with celestial events, perhaps even marking the dates of significant discoveries. The great Muslim geographer Al-Idrisi created his Tabula Rogeriana in the 12th century, a work that seamlessly integrated detailed geographical knowledge with precise astronomical data, effectively mapping the Earth and the sky on a single silver disc. Renaissance mapmakers frequently decorated their works with intricate zodiacal bands. These were far more than decoration. Placing the symbol of Aries at a specific point on the map's border could indicate the spring equinox, subtly dating the map's creation or signaling the most auspicious time to begin a journey across the sea. They drew solstice lines marking the sun's furthest journey north and south, directly onto the land, creating an invisible architecture of solar power that governed everything from agriculture to empire. This celestial coding proves that these documents were advanced scientific instruments, a perfect fusion of what could be seen with the eye and what was felt with the soul. The mathematics required to project the curved dome of the heavens onto a flat sheet of vellum was staggeringly complex, a silent testament to the intellectual giants who saw no divide between the clockwork of the cosmos and the shape of our world. A flat map of our round world is a beautiful lie. To peel the curved skin of the planet and press it onto a page requires a mathematical formula, a projection, and every single one of these formulas is a compromise that silently chooses a winner and a loser. The most famous of these, the Mercator Projection, was a masterstroke for 16th century sailors, as its straight lines represented true compass bearings, making navigation across the open ocean beautifully simple. But this navigational perfection came with a hidden, profound cost. The Mercator Projection violently stretches the world as it moves away from the equator, magnificently exaggerating the size of landmasses near the poles. On a standard classroom map, Greenland appears to be the same size as the entire continent of Africa. In reality, you could fit 14 Greenlands into Africa. Europe seems to loom over South America, when in truth South America is nearly double Europe's size. A cartographic mathematician explains that every map projection is a compromise, and that compromise always favors a particular perspective. For centuries, the perspective favored was that of the European colonial powers. Their northern territories, from the British Isles to Scandinavia, were portrayed as vastly larger than they are, while the equatorial global south was systematically shrunk. This was not an accident of math. It was a consequence of it, creating a visual hierarchy that placed the colonizers at the center of a grander, more dominant stage. In the 1970s, a German historian named Arno Peters fought back with a different kind of lie. His Peters projection sacrificed the accuracy of shapes to preserve the true proportions of land area. In this startling map, Africa and South America are elongated but correctly sized, stretching across the center of the world like the continents they truly are. The northern powers are shrunk back to their proper scale, a deliberate correction to a centuries-old visual bias. The fight between these two maps reveals a simple, powerful truth. The true shape of the world is often sacrificed for a narrative, and the mathematical grid we choose to lay over it is never neutral. It is a political statement disguised as geometry, a silent argument about which parts of the world matter most. And if the very grid can be a tool of persuasion, then the words written upon it carry an even heavier weight. A name on a map is a claim stamped onto the landscape. This is the power of toponymy, the study of place names, where every label is a historical archive written in a few compressed letters. Look at a map of the Americas and you will see a battlefield of nomenclature. The mighty Mississippi River carries an indigenous name meaning Great River, flowing right past cities like St. Louis or New Orleans that bear the imprint of European empires. Each name tells a story of encounter and often a story of deliberate erasure. When the British seized the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam, they immediately renamed it New York after the Duke of York. In a single administrative act, they wiped the previous identity off the map and imposed their own, a cartographic conquest as powerful as any military victory. A linguistic anthropologist perfectly captures this reality, stating that to name a place is to claim it, and to change a name is to overwrite its history. These names are a palimpsest, a parchment where old writing is imperfectly erased to make room for the new. You can still see the faint traces of the original text beneath the surface. The persistence of Native American names for rivers and mountains, like the Susquehanna or the Adirondacks, speaks to a landscape so deeply known by its original inhabitants that even the conquering culture had to adopt their words for it. These names commemorate a different kind of history, one of deep cultural memory and a connection to the land that predates borders. Sometimes the names honor individuals like Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods, or Vancouver, after the explorer George Vancouver, projecting a legacy of power and discovery onto the geography itself. To read a map with this understanding is to see a chronicle of human struggle and interaction. The next time you glance at an atlas, pause on a name you have always taken for granted. Ask what language it comes from, what it means, and whose story it was meant to silence. This layered history is not just in the names, but in the very skin of the map itself, the physical object that has carried these coded messages through time. The very skin of a map can confess its deepest secrets. Beyond the lines and names lies the physical object itself, a silent witness made of parchment, paper, and ink. Its material composition holds a hidden biography, a forensic record of its origin and its journey through the centuries. Take a medieval map drawn on vellum, a parchment made from animal skin. The specific type of creature, whether it was a calf, a sheep, or a goat, and the unique preparation techniques of the region where it was tanned, can pinpoint the map's geographical origin. The inks tell their own story. A conservation scientist specializing in historical documents confirms that the materiality of a map is a silent witness to its journey through time, and modern science allows us to interrogate that witness. The iron gall ink common in the Middle Ages, made from oak galls and iron salts, has a distinct chemical fingerprint that changes predictably as it ages. By analyzing this signature, experts can not only date the map but also detect a clever forgery. A modern counterfeit might use an ink that looks correct to the naked eye, but its chemical composition will betray it as an imposter from a different era. This is precisely what happened with the controversial Vineland map. Intense scientific debate has raged for decades over the chemical makeup of its ink, with some analyses suggesting the presence of a 20th century compound, a modern ghost in the machine that casts grave doubt on its authenticity. Even the paper holds clues invisible to the unaided eye. Watermarks, the unique designs embedded in the paper during its manufacture, act like a printer's signature. These faint impressions, often visible only when held against a light, can identify the specific paper mill that produced the sheet and narrow the date of creation to within a few years. But some of the most dramatic revelations come from what has been erased. Advanced techniques like multispectral imaging use different wavelengths of light to peer beneath the surface. A map that appears pristine to our eyes might, under this scientific gaze, reveal a completely different coastline sketched in faint, erased carbon, or secret annotations scrawled in the margins by a long-dead owner. These are the palimpsests of cartography, the ghostly first drafts and hidden messages embedded in the object's very fibers. This forensic layer transforms the map from a simple document into a physical artifact, a piece of evidence whose secrets are locked not in its symbols but in the chemistry of its creation. The grid of longitude and latitude is not the only way our world can be drawn. Entire civilizations have mapped their existence using a completely different geometry, one where a story can be a road and a song can be a mountain range. Indigenous Australian cultures perfected this with their songlines, intricate maps of the land that are not drawn on paper but performed through song, dance, and ceremony. A songline charts the paths of ancestral creator beings as they moved across the landscape during the dream time, singing the world into existence. To navigate from a waterhole to a sacred mountain, a person does not consult a chart with a scale. Instead, they recall the specific verses of the song that describe the landmarks, the turns, and the events that happened there. The geography and the mythology are one and the same, a lived, storied landscape where every rock and river is a verse in an epic poem. An ethnocartographer clarifies this profound difference, noting that for many cultures, a map is not an objective representation but a lived, storied landscape. This concept shatters the very foundation of Western cartography. It insists that a map can be a temporal, auditory experience, not just a static visual one. Across the vast Pacific, Polynesian navigators developed their own brilliant alternative to the European map. Their stick charts were dynamic sculptures made from palm ribs and shells, mapping not the solid land but the invisible patterns of the ocean itself. The curved sticks represented the swells and currents, while the shells marked the positions of islands. A navigator would memorize the feel of these patterns, learning to read the ocean's rhythms by the way the waves rocked his canoe. He was mapping forces, not forms, navigating a liquid world through a deeply tactile and experiential understanding. Similarly, Inuit hunters would carve concise mental maps into pieces of wood or walrus ivory. These were not literal portraits of the coastline, but memory aids that encoded critical information about sailing directions, sheltered coves, and hunting grounds, all in a portable format that could be read by touch in the dim light of an igloo or the harsh glare of the Arctic sun. Each of these systems represents a lost projection, a unique spatial conception born from a direct and necessary relationship with the environment. They prove that cartography is not a universal language of lines and coordinates. It is a deeply cultural dialect shaped by survival, spirituality, and a fundamental need to tell the story of a place. How different would our own sense of the world be if our maps were sung instead of printed? This diversity of spatial understanding was the very engine that powered the greatest voyages of discovery, long before a compass ever pointed north. A British spy named Robert Jenkins secretly charted the Spanish coastline in the 1730s, his drawings of fortifications and safe anchorages becoming more valuable than a chest of gold. His work was a direct act of cartographic espionage, providing the intelligence that would fuel British raids throughout the Caribbean. For nations at war, a single accurate map could determine the fate of an empire, making the cartographer's studio a front line in the silent war of information. A historian of intelligence services confirms this, stating that in the archives of many foreign ministries, you will find rooms dedicated not to treaties but to stolen maps. The pursuit was relentless. The British Admiralty employed a network of agents and bribed foreign officials to acquire Portuguese and Spanish portolan charts, the secrets of which allowed their navy to dominate sea lanes and cripple enemy supply lines. Centuries later, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union produced shockingly detailed street maps of Western cities like Washington and London. These were not for tourism. They were tactical documents marked with building numbers, bridge load capacities, and the precise widths of streets, all crucial data for potential military operations or sabotage campaigns. The methods of creation were as clandestine as the maps themselves. Spies used telescopic lenses to sketch defenses from a distant hill, or they posed as merchants to gain access to restricted port cities, memorizing depths and currents to record later in code. A map drawn from such espionage could reveal the one vulnerable stretch of beach for an amphibious landing or expose a hidden mountain pass that allowed an army to appear where it was least expected. The famous Mitchell map, used during the North American negotiations of the 1780s, was prized precisely because its detailed rendering of colonial borders gave British diplomats a crucial advantage. These documents were not passive references, they were active weapons that shaped the very boundaries of the modern world. When a nation's survival hinged on controlling information, the most dangerous spy was not always the one with a pistol, but the one with a perfect memory and a steady hand for drawing a coastline. Every map has a silent partner, the hand that paid for its creation. Look past the ink and parchment to the patron who commissioned the work, and you will find the most influential force shaping its reality. A map funded by a powerful trading company, for instance, might render its own shipping lanes as broad, safe highways across the sea, while the territories of its rivals fade into vague, poorly defined shadows or disappear from the chart altogether. The patron's agenda, whether driven by economic ambition, dynastic pride, or personal glory, directly dictated which features were magnified, which were quietly minimized, and which were erased from the record entirely. A scholar of Renaissance patronage systems perfectly captures this dynamic, stating that the map you see is often the world as the patron wished it to be seen, not as it necessarily was. This is the cartography of desire. Consider the Cantino planisphere, a stunning Portuguese world chart from the early 16th century. It is believed this map was secretly smuggled to an Italian agent, Alberto Cantino, to showcase Portugal's monumental discoveries along the coast of Brazil and Africa. The map is not a neutral document. It is a boast, a deliberate performance of power meant to impress a foreign duke with Portugal's burgeoning maritime empire. The coastlines Portugal controlled are rendered with exquisite, confident detail, a visual claim to ownership and knowledge, while other regions remain sketchy or filled with conventional decoration. To spot these biases for yourself, you must become a comparative detective. Place a map commissioned by the Spanish crown next to one from the same era funded by their Portuguese rivals. You will likely see two different worlds. The Spanish map might exaggerate the extent of their Molucca spice claims, while the Portuguese chart shrinks those same islands to insignificance, pushing its own discoveries in Brazil into the foreground. Look for regions drawn with unexplained, meticulous detail that seems disconnected from the map's stated purpose. Why would a general world atlas devote an inordinate amount of space to the forests of a specific German principality? The answer almost certainly lies in the Duke who financed the project and wanted his personal hunting grounds immortalized. The elaborate artistic flourishes, the gilded crests, the dedications within the Cartouches, they are not just decoration. They are receipts of patronage, permanent proof of a financial transaction that traded geographical truth for a flattering reflection of power. So the next time you analyze a historical map, let your first question be, who paid for this? The answer will illuminate every line, every omission, and every strangely emphasized feature on the page. A gilded frame overflows with symbolic figures, a tiny stage play set right on the face of the world. These ornate panels, the Cartouches, are the map's true frontispiece, its concentrated declaration of intent. Far more than simple title boxes, they are narrative windows and powerful status symbols, compressing the entire worldview of the map into a single, breathtaking illustration. Picture a Baroque masterpiece from a 17th-century Dutch atlas, its cartouche supported by a muscular Neptune and a regal Europa, while exotic figures representing Africa, Asia, and the Americas look on. This was not random decoration. It was a deliberate allegory, a visual statement that the mapmaker's patron, and by extension his nation, held dominion over the entire globe, both its lands and its seas. Every element within these intricate frames was a deliberate choice. The fruits spilling from a cornucopia spoke of colonial wealth and natural abundance. The scientific instruments, like astrolabes and compasses, carefully placed beside the title, asserted the map's accuracy and modern authority. An expert in decorative arts confirms that the cartouche is the map's frontispiece, a microcosm of its intended message and aesthetic ambition. To deconstruct a cartouche is to read the map's introductory argument before you have even glanced at a single coastline. Consider the magnificent works of the Blieu family, whose atlases were the pinnacle of Dutch cartography. Their cartouches are dense with symbolic meaning. A lion, the symbol of Dutch strength, might stand guard over the title, while the coat of arms of a wealthy merchant who commissioned the map is displayed prominently, a public thank you note etched in ink and prestige. The inclusion of a specific exotic animal, like a parrot or a camel, was not just a display of artistic skill. It was a direct reference to the global trade networks that made such a lavish publication possible. These frames tell stories of cultural encounter, but always from a position of power, framing the unfamiliar world within a European aesthetic of order and control. The next time you study an old map, let your eyes linger on its most elaborate part. Read the cartouche first. Ask yourself what story these figures are acting out. Are they celebrating conquest, showcasing knowledge, or flattering a king? The answer will reveal the central bias through which you must view every subsequent geographical detail on the page, framing the entire world within a single, beautifully crafted lie. A forgotten grid lies beneath the ink, a mathematical ghost from another age. These unexplained coordinate systems, etched onto maps long before global standards existed, are not random lines. They are the architectural blueprints of lost worldviews, a silent language of measurement whose key has been misplaced by history. Consider the enigmatic portolan charts of the Mediterranean. To our modern eyes, their coastlines are surprisingly accurate, but they are overlaid with a web of Rhumb lines radiating from central points, creating a complex star pattern. This is not a latitude and longitude grid. It was a practical tool for mariners to plot constant compass bearings across the open sea, a local geometric solution to a global problem. The units of measurement used to create this web, however, remain a subject of intense debate. Were they based on a specific Roman mile, a day's sail, or the astronomical observations of a particular school of navigation? A geodetic scientist confirms that these anomalous grids are the fingerprints of forgotten surveying techniques or philosophical concepts of space. We see this same principle in the gridded maps of ancient China, such as those found in the 11th century Yujai II, or Map of the Tracks of Yu. This stone map depicts China with an astonishingly precise grid of squares, each representing 100 Chinese li. This system was not designed for spherical navigation but for land administration, dividing the empire into manageable units for taxation and bureaucratic control. The grid imposed a man-made order onto the natural landscape, reflecting a philosophical concept of a rectangular, centrally governed world. Other mysterious frameworks might be rooted in theoretical models, like a map based on the long-discarded idea of a flat, rectangular Earth, its corners marked by mythical pillars. Deciphering these cryptic lattices is like finding a safe without the combination. The specific spacing between the lines could reveal the local measurement unit, a cubit or a rod, that defined reality for that culture. The orientation of the entire grid, perhaps aligned not to true north but to a sacred mountain or the path of a specific star, unveils a cosmological belief system written in geometry. Each unexplained line is a direct conduit into the mind of the mapmaker, proving that the very tools we use to measure our world are never permanent. They are as fluid and contested as the territories they attempt to define. A map is a liar that cannot help but tell the truth about its own era. This paradox lies at the heart of every historical chart, a document that may distort geography but faithfully freezes a precise moment in time. Think of each one not as a definitive guide, but as a time capsule sealed with ink, its contents perfectly preserved. The most famous temporal clue is the island of California. For over 100 years, from the mid-1600s to the mid-1700s, countless European maps depicted this American state as a massive, separate island floating off the western coast. If you find a map showing this geographical error, you have instantly placed it within that specific window of history. This was not a unanimous mistake, but a widely accepted truth based on flawed exploration reports and the persuasive power of printed authority. Political borders are another powerful timestamp. A map of Europe that shows a unified Germany did not exist before 1871, just as a map of Africa without the bold, straight lines of colonial partitions predates the late 19th century scramble for the continent. The rise and fall of cities offer quieter but equally telling evidence. A bustling port town marked on one map might be a forgotten ruin on another, its disappearance a silent record of a shifted trade route or a natural disaster. Even the artistic flourishes hold clues. The style of a ship's sails drawn in the ocean, or the cut of a nobleman's clothing illustrated in the margin, can be traced to specific decades, acting as a fashion clock for the entire document. A historical detective specializing in documents confirms that these are the unintentional confessions a map makes, the details that betray its true age regardless of the stories it tries to sell. Heraldry is a particularly precise clock. The coats of arms and royal insignia adorning a map are tied directly to the reign of a specific monarch. A map of the British colonies bearing the cipher of Queen Anne can be dated with confidence to her rule between 1702 and 1714. If an identical map appears later with the symbols of King George I, it is not a new discovery but a new addition, updated for a new political reality to maintain its relevance and its market value. The state of geographical knowledge itself is the broadest timeline. A world map from the late 15th century will show a vast, empty Atlantic, while one from just 50 years later will feature the unmistakable bulge of South America, a direct result of Columbus and Cabral's voyages. The printing technique used is the final physical giveaway. The sharp, raised lines of an engraving made from a copper plate feel different to the touch than the flat, uniform ink of a later lithograph. Each technological shift left its own fingerprint on the paper. By cross-referencing these clues, you can triangulate the birth date of any map. You become an investigator sifting through the evidence it never meant to leave behind, hearing the echoes of the world as it was the day the cartographer laid down his pen. The kingdom of Prester John was drawn onto maps with the same confident ink as France or Spain. This legendary Christian ruler, believed to command a paradise of riches and piety somewhere in the depths of Asia or Africa, was not a decorative fantasy for medieval and Renaissance cartographers. He was a geopolitical reality, a potential ally against Islamic powers, and his sprawling empire was charted for centuries as a genuine destination for diplomats and explorers. This was the powerful influence of mythology, where entire realms born from story were granted a permanent address on the world map. A classicist specializing in the reception of myth explains that the boundary between myth and geography was porous. For centuries, the location of the Amazons or the Golden Fleece was a legitimate cartographic quest. These were not lies to the people who drew them, but plausible extensions of their known world, built on a foundation of revered ancient texts and travelers' tales. Consider the relentless hunt for El Dorado, the Golden Man. This legend began as a rumor about a Muisca tribal chief who covered himself in gold dust, but in the European imagination, it rapidly transformed into an entire city of gold, a place called Manoa. This mythical city began to appear on maps of South America throughout the 16th and 17th centuries, often situated near a large, inland lake in the jungles of Guyana or Venezuela. These maps did not just record geography, they actively created it, sending wave after wave of conquistadors and fortune seekers to their deaths in pursuit of a cartographic mirage. The same fate awaited those searching for the 7 cities of gold, or Cibola, which Spanish explorers fervently believed lay in the deserts of the American Southwest. Coronado's massive expedition was launched on the strength of such a map, leading him across vast stretches of land only to find humble pueblos of adobe. The Fountain of Youth, another potent myth, was persistently placed on maps of the Caribbean, particularly in the region of Florida, following the voyages of Ponce de Leon. These incorporations reveal a world where the line between discovery and desire was hopelessly blurred. A map was not just a tool for navigation, but a canvas for ambition, where the deepest human hopes for wealth, immortality, and divine favor were projected directly onto the landscape. The cartographer's pen gave these dreams a shape and a location, making them irresistible targets for the empires that funded exploration. This blending of fact and fiction forces a humbling realization. The most significant inaccuracies on a map are sometimes not errors of measurement, but a perfect record of what people desperately wanted to be true. The lush green of a forest or the deep blue of a river was a deliberate declaration, not an artistic whim. Every color on a historical map was part of a silent code, a sophisticated language of classification and control. Picture a 19th century British imperial map, where a bold, unmistakable red consistently floods the territories of the empire. This was not a random choice. That specific shade of vermilion was a visual drumbeat, hammering home the global reach of British power from the Canadian wilderness to the Australian outback. The color became synonymous with dominion, a cartographic brand that anyone could understand at a single glance. A conservator and color historian confirms this, stating that color on a map is a code for classification, and its materiality is a passport to the past. These color conventions were often rigidly defined. On many European maps, a specific yellow ochre might represent arid deserts, while a particular green derived from copper salts marked fertile plains. These were not universal standards but local dialects of color. A mapmaker in Venice might use a different set of hues than his counterpart in Amsterdam, creating a regional fingerprint based on the available pigments and the artistic traditions of his workshop. The choice to color a rival nation's territory in a muted, washed-out tone was a subtle act of cartographic disrespect, visually diminishing their importance on the world stage. But the secrets of color go far deeper than symbolism, locked within the very chemistry of the pigments. The most expensive color of all was a brilliant ultramarine blue, painstakingly ground from the semi-precious stone lapis lazuli, which for centuries could only be sourced from a single remote region in Afghanistan. Its presence on a map was a direct statement of wealth and prestige, proving the patron could afford such an extravagant display. Vermilion red, made from toxic mercury sulfide, and vibrant green, often produced from arsenic-based compounds, each have their own unique chemical signatures. Modern scientists can analyze these minuscule pigment particles using X-ray fluorescence, essentially asking the map itself where it came from. This forensic analysis can expose a forgery instantly. A map purported to be from the 1600s would be betrayed by the presence of a synthetic blue pigment like Prussian blue, which was not invented until the early 18th century. The color itself becomes a timestamp, an unbreakable alibi that confirms or condemns the map's claimed origins. So the next time you admire the rich palette of an antique map, look closer. You are not just seeing a colorful illustration. You are reading a classified system of power, written in a language of minerals and politics, where every hue holds a story of empire, commerce, and the relentless human drive to bring order to the world through a carefully chosen palette. That dense web of lines on a Portolan chart is more than a navigational tool. It is a frozen conversation between sailors, but some of those lines speak in riddles. Across the Mediterranean, you will find charts where the predictable star pattern of Rhumb lines is broken by a single strand that points stubbornly into nothingness, converging with others on a vacant stretch of open sea. There is no island there, no hidden reef, no logical reason for such a precise bearing. To dismiss these as simple errors is to ignore the meticulous craft of the cartographer. These anomalies are the ghostly echoes of oral sailing directions, transcribed onto parchment but not fully understood today. One compelling theory is that these lines account for magnetic variation, the subtle difference between true north and magnetic north that changes over time and location. A medieval navigator relying on his compass might have known that to reach a certain port, you could not simply sail the direct Rhumb line. You had to correct your course by a few degrees, a piece of practical knowledge that became a permanent, if cryptic, mark on the map. Other lines might point to optimal celestial observation points, locations at sea where, on a specific date, the sun or a star would align perfectly with a landmark on the distant coast, providing a perfect fix for a vessel's position. These were the GPS waypoints of their era. Some historians propose these mysterious convergences were secret meeting points for merchants looking to avoid official ports and their taxes, turning the empty ocean into a clandestine marketplace. Deciphering these anomalous paths is like listening to the whispers of ancient mariners, a direct line to the economic realities that drove exploration. The chart was not just a guide, it was a business plan, and every unexplained line potentially leads to a fortune made or a monopoly protected. The pursuit of wealth has always been the quiet engine of the cartographer's art. While kings dreamed of glory, merchants and corporations demanded maps that could chart a course directly to profit, transforming beautiful parchment into the most valuable corporate asset of the age. These were not maps for the public, but secret ledgers of resources and routes, their accuracy fiercely guarded to protect the lifeblood of a trade monopoly. Consider a map commissioned by the Dutch East India Company, the first true multinational corporation. Its depiction of the Moluccas, the legendary Spice Islands, would be exquisitely detailed, showing every cove where cloves and nutmeg could be loaded. But look closer. A crucial deep water passage between two islands might be conspicuously omitted, or the distance to a key port deliberately stretched by a few dozen leagues. To a rival English or Portuguese captain relying on a stolen copy, these subtle falsehoods could mean sailing into a dead end or arriving weeks late to the market, a financial disaster orchestrated by a single line on a map. An economic historian perfectly frames this reality, stating that the first global corporations were built on maps, and those maps were their most valuable patents. This corporate secrecy was a matter of national security. The Spanish crown maintained the Padrón Real, a constantly updated master map in Seville that recorded every new discovery in the Americas. Access was strictly controlled, and ship captains were legally required to contribute their findings upon return, adding new silver mines and safe harbors to the official record. This centralized knowledge was power, allowing Spain to dominate the flow of New World treasure for over a century. Similarly, British maps of Indian tea plantations in the 19th century were less about geography and more about industrial management. They meticulously documented the exact boundaries of each estate, the location of processing factories, and the most efficient routes to the ports of Calcutta and Bombay. These charts were tools for maximizing production and controlling a global commodity. To spot these economically motivated distortions, you must learn to read for competitive advantage. Why is a region known for a specific resource, like Brazilian sugar or African gold, rendered with such vague, almost careless detail, while the ports used to export those goods are mapped with microscopic precision? The answer is a deliberate corporate strategy. The map highlights the point of control, the chokehold of commerce, while obscuring the source itself, protecting it from interlopers. The very shape of the world, as drawn by these commercial cartographers, was molded not by a quest for truth, but by the relentless, shaping pressure of profit. A map can be a ghost, whispering the secrets of a world that vanished long before the ink ever dried. Some of the most contentious and fascinating charts are believed to preserve the geographical knowledge of civilizations lost to time, acting as fragile, copied bridges to forgotten epochs. Take the infamous Piri Reis map drawn by the Ottoman admiral in 1513. A fragment of a larger world chart, it shows not only the coast of South America, but also a landmass to the south that some researchers controversially identify as the continent of Antarctica, and remarkably without its ice cap. The map's own annotations state that it was compiled from numerous source maps, including some from the time of Alexander the Great. This has led to a compelling, though highly debated, theory that Piri Reis had access to much older charts, perhaps originating from ancient seafaring cultures like the Minoans, whose maritime prowess is well documented, or even from a hypothetical advanced civilization whose maps were copied and recopied for centuries. An archaeologist specializing in ancient technologies offers a crucial perspective, noting that every anomalous feature on an old map is a potential clue to a knowledge chain we have yet to reconstruct. This is not about proving wild theories, but about following the evidence wherever it leads, no matter how inconvenient. We see similar puzzles in other parts of the world. The Zhangheng maps from Han Dynasty China, though known only through textual descriptions, suggest a sophisticated cartographic tradition that integrated celestial observation with terrestrial surveying, knowledge that may have been preserved and passed down through monastic or bureaucratic lineages after the dynasty's fall. Even older is the Babylonian world map, a clay tablet from the 6th century BC, which depicts the world as a flat disk surrounded by a bitter river, with Babylon proudly at its center. While its geography is mythological, its very existence proves a sustained effort to conceptualize and record the known world, a tradition that could have absorbed and encoded far more ancient local knowledge. The critical task is to separate plausible transmission from pure speculation. Could a Greek scholar in the Library of Alexandria have studied a Babylonian map? Could a Minoan portolan have survived long enough to be copied by a medieval Arab geographer, whose work then found its way to an Ottoman court? These are the chains of possibility that historians must painstakingly test. This exploration fundamentally pushes the boundaries of historical cartography, forcing us to consider a humbling possibility. Our modern understanding of the world's geography may not be a clean, linear progression, but a story built upon much older, partially erased foundations, with each map holding a fragment of a puzzle we are only beginning to assemble. A copperplate engraving could be copied 1,000 times, each impression carrying the same secret to 1,000 different hands. The printing press shattered the old world of cartography, where a single hand-drawn map was a unique treasure, expensive and easily controlled. Suddenly, geographical knowledge could flood the market, but so could its errors and its deceptions. In the bustling workshops of 16th century Antwerp and Amsterdam, artisans etched intricate coastlines onto copper plates. This process allowed for incredible detail, but those same plates were fragile assets. A rival printer could acquire a published map, engrave a near-identical copy onto a new plate, and sell it as his own, often introducing subtle distortions in the process. The original cartographers carefully placed Phantom Island, meant to catch plagiarists, could be omitted or moved, rendering the trap useless. A historian of print culture observes that the printed map democratized geographical knowledge, but it also initiated a perpetual cat and mouse game between creators and copiers. Mapmakers and their powerful patrons fought back with ingenious methods. They embedded intricate watermarks into the paper during its manufacture, a unique signature visible only when held to the light. They secured royal privileges, early forms of copyright that legally forbade others from copying their work, with severe penalties for those who tried. Perhaps most cleverly, they often sold maps as uncolored prints, leaving the application of color to specialized artisans. A patron could commission a map to be hand-colored according to a private code, using specific hues to mark friendly ports or hostile territories, creating a customized key that a mass-produced, pre-colored version could never replicate. This technological shift did not eliminate secrets, it just changed their medium. The hidden language was no longer solely in the lines of the drawing, but in the very fabric of the paper, the legality of its reproduction, and the exclusive palette of its colorist. The press made the map public, but the most valuable truths remained locked away, accessible only to those who knew how to read between the printed lines. A delicate web of brass rings encloses the entire world, its intricate orbits framing continents and oceans within a cosmic dance. This was the Armillary sphere, a physical model of the heavens that Renaissance mapmakers often integrated directly into their works, placing human geography firmly within a divine and mechanical universe. On the maps of scholars like Sebastian Münster, you do not just see the land, you see the land encircled by nested rings representing the orbits of the Moon, the Sun, and the known planets, all spinning in perfect harmony around our tiny globe. This was far more than artistic flair. It was a profound philosophical statement, a visual declaration that the Earth was merely a single component in a vast, orderly cosmos. A historian of science and imagery confirms this intent, explaining that the armillary sphere on a map was a reminder that to know the world, one must also know the skies. These cosmological diagrams were the ultimate expression of a holistic worldview, where every earthly kingdom, every river and mountain was understood to be connected to and influenced by the celestial spheres above. The magnificent celestial atlases of Andreas Cellarius took this concept to its breathtaking extreme. His charts are less about geography and more about cosmic spectacle, depicting the constellations and planetary motions with such artistic grandeur that the Earth itself becomes a minor footnote in a celestial drama. The message was clear. A map was not just a record of territories, but a universal diagram, a single image attempting to capture the entire structure of creation, from the deepest valley to the furthest star. This symbolic framing served a critical purpose for the rulers who commissioned these works. By showing their domain as an integral part of a God-ordained cosmic order, they legitimized their power, suggesting their reign was as natural and harmonious as the rotation of the planets. To look at such a map was to receive a lesson in humility and wonder, a prompt to see your own place in a scheme far grander than any single empire. It encourages us to ask, when we look at a modern digital map, what is the larger system that frames our world today? What unseen orbits and invisible spheres define the boundaries of our own understanding? A geometric rose window hidden in the street plan of a city, or a perfect pentagram formed by the placement of 5 towns, these are not cartographic accidents. During the Enlightenment, as secret societies like the Freemasons and Rosicrucians spread their philosophical ideals, their unique symbolic language began to subtly influence the very maps that defined the modern world. The compass and square, central Masonic emblems representing moral rectitude and divine order, sometimes found their way into the decorative borders of maps, a quiet signature of the creator's affiliations. More profound than mere decoration, some researchers point to the possibility that entire urban plans, like the layout of Washington, D.C., were conceived with Masonic principles of sacred geometry in mind, embedding ideals of a perfect societal order directly into the landscape. A researcher into esoteric traditions cautions that we must be careful not to see conspiracies everywhere, but the shared symbolic language between some cartographers and secret societies is undeniable. To understand this, we must look at maps created by known members. Consider the work of John Senex, a prominent 18th-century English cartographer and a known Freemason. His celestial charts and world maps often feature intricate frontispieces filled with symbolism that would resonate deeply with an initiated brother. Clusters of 7 stars, allusions to the pillars of Solomon's temple, or the use of specific numbers like 3 or 5 in the layout of his decorative elements are not necessarily proof of a hidden agenda, but they strongly suggest a layer of meaning intended for a specific audience. This was not about concealing geographical facts, but about encoding a worldview. For these enlightened individuals, mapping was a philosophical act. The precise measurement of the Earth was a way to understand the mind of the grand architect of the universe, a central Masonic concept for God. Therefore, a map could be both a scientific document and a spiritual diagram, its lines and symbols serving a dual purpose. The next time you examine an elaborate map from this era, look beyond the coastlines. Ask yourself if the ornate cartouche contains more than just a title. Could those interlocking circles and precise angles be a message, a silent nod to a fraternity of thinkers who saw the world itself as the ultimate lodge. This esoteric layer transforms the map from a tool of navigation into a key for philosophical initiation, a document meant to be read on multiple levels depending on the knowledge of the viewer. A blank space on a map can be the loudest lie of all. When a colonial chart from the 1800s shows the interior of Africa as a vast, empty expanse labeled unexplored, it was not a simple admission of ignorance. It was a calculated political act. That deliberate void erased generations of people, their complex societies, and their deep connection to the land, all to support a legal fiction known as terra nullius, the concept of land belonging to nobody. By drawing a continent as a vacant slate, mapmakers provided the perfect visual justification for conquest, making it appear as if European powers were not invading sovereign territories, but merely occupying empty space. A post-colonial scholar clarifies this devastating strategy, stating that the empty spaces on colonial maps were not voids of information but active constructions of ignorance and dispossession. This cartographic silence was a powerful tool for denying the very existence and sovereignty of indigenous cultures. We see the same tactic used across the globe. Early maps of North America often ignored the sophisticated continent-spanning trail networks established by Native American nations, rendering their civilizations invisible and portraying the land as a trackless wilderness waiting to be tamed. Similarly, some historical Chinese world maps placed the Middle Kingdom at the center in immense, meticulous detail, while deliberately marginalizing the outside world as a periphery of insignificant islands, a reflection of a world centered on celestial and cultural supremacy. These omissions were never neutral. They were conscious choices to exclude what did not fit a specific narrative of power. To become a true map detective, you must train your eye to read the absences with the same intensity as the presences. Ask yourself what a map refuses to show, whose home has been erased to create that tempting void. The answer reveals the most profound secret of all, the bias that sought to reshape the world not with ink, but with a strategically placed and devastating silence. A hyperspectral camera can see the ghost of a map's past. This modern technology captures light far beyond the visible spectrum, revealing faded ink, erased sketches, and hidden annotations that have been completely invisible for centuries. It is just one tool in a new arsenal that is revolutionizing our ability to read the cartographic language. Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, allow historians to layer dozens of historical maps over modern satellite imagery, aligning them with digital precision to track the subtle shifts in coastlines and borders over time. Radiocarbon dating can pinpoint the age of the parchment itself, while sophisticated software can digitally unfold a fragile portolan chart without ever touching its brittle surface. A digital humanities specialist perfectly captures this transformation, stating that we are now able to peel back the layers of a map like an onion, recovering lost data and seeing the cartographer's thought process. Consider the work to digitally reconstruct the world map of Eratosthenes from the 3rd century BC. By analyzing later copies and descriptions, scholars have used these technologies to create a plausible model of how this ancient Greek thinker calculated the Earth's circumference with stunning accuracy. Another profound case is the analysis of the Wald-Siemüller globe gauze, the printed sections meant to be cut out and pasted onto a sphere. Multispectral imaging revealed subtle corrections and guide marks in the margins, showing the mapmaker's own hands at work, troubleshooting the monumental task of projecting a world onto a flat sheet for the very first time. This final investigative technique empowers anyone with access to a digital archive to become a modern-day decipherer. You can overlay a 16th century map of your own hometown onto a modern street grid, watching the ancient roads realign with forgotten paths and streams. These tools do not just give us answers, they give us the ability to ask new, more precise questions of the silent parchment. We are no longer just reading the map, we are conversing with it, uncovering the whispers of its creation, one invisible layer at a time. A map is never just a map. Our journey through the language of cartographic art has revealed that these artifacts are complex texts, where every line, symbol, and blank space encodes a rich narrative of history, power, belief, and deliberate deception. We have navigated from phantom islands born from rumor to the hidden economic codes of trading companies. We have seen how borders were drawn as acts of propaganda, and how a cartographer's personal signature lies hidden in an ornate frame. We have watched empires shrink and grow on a mathematical projection, and learned that the very color of an ocean could be a statement of imperial wealth. Each layer we have peeled back adds profound depth to our understanding of the human past, a chronicle of our ambitions, our fears, and the stories we told ourselves about the world. The next time you encounter an old map, you will see it with new eyes. You are no longer just looking at geography. You are reading a story waiting to be decoded, a frozen moment of triumph, hope, and silent conflict. The skills we have explored together, from questioning the mapmaker's motive to analyzing the chemistry of the ink, empower you to become a detective of history. You now possess the tools to look closer and question the familiar lines that define our world. Let this be your invitation to continue the exploration, to seek out the rich, hidden narratives embedded in the documents and landscapes all around you. If this journey into the secrets of lost maps has captivated your curiosity, we would love to hear from you. Share your own thoughts or a map mystery that intrigues you in the comments below, and subscribe for more adventures into the forgotten corners of history.